the pump and have cars that don't go as far per gallon of gas as they do today. So I don't understand what kind of scheme this is, but why would we want to go back on that level of fuel efficiency and override that by this amendment? So does my colleague understand? Is that, am I correct?
Well, I will answer, and then I will yield for further questions. I think you are making the case so clearly. The one area we know we can make progress on in terms of getting off foreign oil is cars that get better fuel economy. And my friend worked so diligently on the Commerce Committee, along with Senator Snowe, Senator Feinstein, others. We all worked, but my friend took a tremendous lead in this. Now, in this particular amendment, which is named something it has nothing to do with reducing or preventing gas taxes or something, has nothing to do with that. If this passes, and I hope it won't pass, and if it were to be signed into law, essentially takes the EPA completely out of the picture in terms of fuel economy, which means that all the progress we've made in getting more fuel economy, cleaning up the air, will be gone. And this little child here, gasping for air as it is going to be gasping for air, more air. Children are particularly vulnerable. So you're right on so many fronts. If we were to pass this, we would turn around from all our progress we just made. We'd stop the states from being able to do more on their own. And we would lose the competition in the world for the most fuel-efficient vehicles, which is so critical. Everybody looks to us. And consumers, as my friend points out, would miss out on, frankly, thousands of dollars a year in savings. My friend, I hope I've answered her question.
I'm just amazed because my predecessor, a Republican from Washington, was fighting for fuel efficiency standards in the 90s. So I don't know why we would be here in 2011 with a radical proposal to basically erase the ability for fuel efficiency standards. But I have a question about public health, too, because I think my colleague from California has articulated something that is greater than any economic issue, and that is health and clean air and healthier children because of that. And I don't understand why we'd want to go back on the Clean Air Act as it relates to the adverse health outcomes. I mean, why would you want to have more problems with asthma attacks, heart attacks, strokes, visits to the emergency room, all of these things? And EPA just came out with a comprehensive cost-benefit study on the Clean Air Act, and their findings were stark. They said it was something like the Clean Air Act will save our society $2 trillion through 2020. I mean, that is amazing. So when I look at that, and we're going to say polluters don't have to pay or adhere to the law, I mean, we're just going to cause ourselves more cost in the future with health care. So I asked my colleague from California, what is it that Senator McConnell and Inhofe think they know about this that is different than what the American Lung Association, the American Public Health Association, the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, Physicians for Social Responsibility, and Trust for America's Health. What is it that they know that those organizations don't know? Because those organizations are saying we have a serious health problem and let's make sure that it is addressed through the Clean Air Act. Are they just ignoring this issue?
Well, obviously, I can't speak for my colleagues. I cannot. But I have to just look at what would happen if this were to become law. And EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, signed into law by Richard Nixon, a Republican, overwhelmingly, and by the way, the Clean Air Act amendment signed into law by George Herbert Walker Bush, they would say to the EPA, you're out. You no longer have the ability to do your job, which is laid out in the Clean Air Act. This particular amendment changes the Clean Air Act and says, I say to my friend, to the EPA, you no longer can look at carbon pollution, you can't look at any pollution at all that relates to the climate change issue. And in doing so, they are in a frontal assault against the American Lung Association, the American Public Health Association, the American Thoracic Society, the Asthma and Allergy Foundation, Physicians for Social Responsibility, Trust for America's Health. But I say to my friend, even more than that, they're going against the American people. And I wanted to share this poll with you. In February, 1 month ago, really 1 month ago, there was a bipartisan poll. Republican pollster and a Democratic pollster teamed up, and they asked the people what they thought about these very issues. 69% of the American people, this is not people in Washington State and California, this is all over the country, think EPA should update the Clean Air Act standards with stricter air pollution limits. The McConnell Amendment stops them from updating the Clean Air Act standards. As a matter of fact, it repeals the ability of the EPA to ever address carbon pollution, which, by the way, is a clear endangerment to the people, and I'd ask unanimous consent to place in the record EPA's endangerment finding.
Without objection.
And I'd say to my good friend and my colleague from Washington State, in EPA's summary of the endangerment that our people would face, they talk about the worsening of ground-level ozone pollution if the EPA isn't allowed to enforce the law, which is what McConnell offers us today. They say exposure to ground-level ozone has been linked to respiratory health problems ranging from decreased lung function. Now, we know kids even today, in all the progress we've made, kids who are born in areas that are close to freeways, I say to my friend, close to railroads, close to ports, have a reduced lung function. At birth, they have a lesser lung function. What are we doing here? How dare people come here and hurt the American people? That's what this is. This is about hurting the American people, hurting America's families, stopping the Environmental Protection Agency from cleaning up the air, cleaning up pollution. The people, here's this, 69% say EPA scientists, not Congress, should set pollution standards, and yet this amendment says, EPA, get out of the picture. We don't want you. We want to do this. The politicians, well, the people don't want this. And that's why I hope we will reject this terrible amendment that endangers the people. I continue to yield for a further question.
I thank my colleague because in my next question deals with technology, and one thing I appreciate about working with the senator from California is we certainly share an interest in innovation and the innovation economy and making sure we don't do things to damage it, since so much job creation has happened from the technology sectors and from our improvements. So I was really surprised to think about this amendment from the perspective of it would really kill those jobs in America. I mean, if you basically say you're going to allow people to continue to pollute and not adhere to the Clean Air Act, all those technologies that are about getting us off of those pollutants and diversifying our energy sources would no longer be incented. I mean, you and I probably would say we need to do a lot more to incent those and stop incenting those that cause so much harmful pollution. But the United States really is this largest producer of environmental technology goods and services, and the environmental industry has approximately 119,000 firms and generates $300 billion in revenues and $43 billion in exports. Well, it's just the environmental technology industry. So that's 119,000 firms, $300 billion in revenue, and $43 billion in exports. So it's a very vibrant part of our economy that's based on we want to do something about toxic pollutants. And if all of a sudden you pass a bill in the United States Senate saying we don't want to do anything about these toxic pollutants, even though the Clean Air Act says we should, and the Supreme Court has said, yes, EPA, you should, then all of a sudden you're basically saying, okay, how far are you willing to go in saying you don't need to deal with toxins and pollutants? So to me, the foreign markets in developing countries who are already getting an edge on some of the clean energy technologies would worry me that they would continue to make advancements even more. with these technologies. So I don't understand why this radical measure, would somehow people think would, help us when the foreign technology market would continue to grow and we would lose market share. So I asked my friend from California, doesn't it make more sense to think about the future jobs that we are trying to attract because they're so much bigger than thinking about this in the sense of 20th century jobs? That is almost what we're advocating. Let's go back to saying if you're a pollutant, it's okay because somehow you're creating jobs. And the market opportunity, I'm asking my colleague, isn't the market opportunity more in these technology jobs and environmental technology jobs?
Well, my friend is so right. If this is an economic argument, bring it on to us. We know the numbers. You've laid them out here. We know the tens of thousands of firms that are moving forward because we have these laws on the books. The clean air technologies and the clean water technologies and the safe drinking water technologies are wanted by the whole world. And I just have to say to my friends who are pushing this, I want to tell them something that they don't seem to either understand or maybe they don't really want to hear. But I'm going to say it. The whole world is going green, no matter where you look. Walmart is going green. Walmart is going green. And I've had my differences with them on their policies on workers. Walmart is going green. And why? Because, as my friend said, it saves money. The whole world is going green. What does it mean? It means that everyone wants to save money. Everyone is looking for better energy opportunities that are clean. And everybody wants clean energy. If we back away from that, we are saying to China, go for it. You'll get the whole market. And we'll still be pumping for oil. And by the way, I have a message on that front. Oil companies have 57 million acres of land and offshore tracts that they already have a permit to drill in. My friends on the other side in another debate keep talking about, let's drill, drill. Why don't they drill where they already have the leases and it's already approved? So that's not a debate here. What's a debate here is why would we, as my friend asked me, turn away from policies that result in clean technologies that the entire world wants, clean technologies that support 100,000 plus jobs, more than 100,000 businesses, tens of thousands of more jobs. Why would we do that? And my answer is, to me, it would be a self-inflicted wound on our country. When this is an opportunity, my friend knows, I think, John Doerr, who's a venture capitalist. He has told us for years now that if we invest in clean energy, if we incentivize clean energy, the venture capitalists will come off the sidelines with more billions than they ever gave to high-tech and biotech combined. So why would anyone support this amendment, which would just turn the clock back on fuel economy, as my friend said, on clean energy technology, and turn the clock back on our little kids who are struggling as it is with asthma? Yield for another question.
Well, I think my colleague from California, I also am interested in your opinion about this as it relates to gas prices, because people are out, I think House Republicans anyway, and maybe even the minority leader, is if we pass this amendment, somehow gas prices are going to come down. And we all know, because, it just seems about almost every summer we have these debates about what will impact gas prices. But this measure, it's so radical, and when I think about even if EPA continued to act on their fulfillment of the Supreme Court decision that they must act in regulating pollutants, which is something that rules on oil refineries won't even go into effect until December of 2011, and the final rules aren't even due until later this year. So we're talking about rules that don't go into effect till 2013, 2014, 2015. So I asked my colleague from California, how would that have an impact? We don't even know what they're going to be. We're going to wait until July hopefully, to hear from EPA about that. And so somehow that's going to affect gas prices today. I think what we know to be true is that getting off of oil and having more fuel-efficient cars has reduced our dependence, saved consumers money, and allowed them to have a choice in the marketplace. We ought to continue in that direction, not this direction. But do you think that those rules going into effect are somehow having an effect today? Aren't we talking about people who have already written about this as false rhetoric in the debate, that it's not accurate, that this will impact the price at the pump tomorrow?
Well, my friend, of course, is right on target when she points out that, first of all, the EPA is being very cautious the way it moves on this. And they're only going after the biggest, dirtiest polluters, okay? And I think most of the people I talk to out there say, you know, my mother always said, clean up your room. And if you're belching all the smoke into the air, you got to take some responsibility for it, especially when you're making billions and billions and billions of dollars of profit. No one has come to me and said big oil is suffering because they were under the Clean Air Act all these years. But it's true. There is no pressing matter before us. And they are using this, the problems in Libya and the tragedy in Japan. And by the way, I'd ask unanimous consent to place into the record a statement regarding the situation in Japan at the appropriate time after this debate is finished and the votes are here.
Without objection.
Thank you. What I want to say here is, yes, the Upton bill, which is the same as this McConnell amendment, he says, Upton, a bill that would halt the EPA from regulating greenhouse gases would help stop rising gas prices. That's what he says, that this amendment before us will help stop rising gas prices. The nonpartisan PolitiFact, which is an independent website, looked at this, and I put this in the record. Have I put this in the record, this PolitiFact? If not, I would ask unanimous consent to place it in the record. When they come to the end of looking at Mr. Upton's claim that this would reduce gas prices, and this is the same bill as the Upton bill, they say, we find this claim false. So in this debate, I feel really comfortable because I'm on the side of the truth. I'm on the side of the American people who are telling us, stop, Congress, don't tell EPA to stop enforcing the law. That's wrong. So I feel good about that. We're on the side of these children who we're protecting. We're on the side of consumers. We're on the side of progress. We're on the side of business. We're on the side of exports. We want America to be the leader. My friend is an innovator. My friend knows what it is to go to the capital markets and say, I've got a great idea. And she knows what government can do to encourage this type of investment. Government can't do everything, but we can set the stage. And one of the ways we set the stage for a great multi-billion-dollar economy to take off is by having a Clean Air Act that saves our children from these terrible air-gasping days, but also creates technologies that clean up our air. And my friend is so right. The false claim that this amendment is going to lower gas prices, I mean, that's been debunked right now. That claim has been debunked by people who have no axe to grind. And I just appreciate my friend coming here and engaging in this. Does she have any further questions?
If you can indulge me on this, because, you know, I see our colleagues on the floor, and as a member of the Small Business Committee, I am as frustrated as they are that this important legislation that would help small businesses in America grow is being now held hostage by this amendment. I mean, I look at, you know, this issue, the broader issue of discussion, as some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have said, as a major policy issue. Well, if it's a major policy issue and it's a major policy change, why should you try to hang it in an amendment onto the small business bill? I mean, is that for, making some industry or somebody happy? Is that why they're doing it? Because if this is really, as they're saying, a major policy, then let's have a major policy discussion. I know my colleague notes that you and I both support legislation that would have a major policy discussion here. Some of that legislation has gotten bipartisan support, so I think our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have been to the floor saying we should address climate and do so. Well, if that's the case, let's have that broad debate. Is that my colleague's understanding that some Republicans would like to address it and are saying now that we need to address it and not leave it all to EPA? If that's the case, then let's have that debate, but let's not have a rifle shot amendment that basically guts the law as it's being implemented, but let's have a discussion about what would be a more flexible approach to implementation of the requirements to regulate pollutants. So
Senator from Washington poses a really important question, and that is, why are we seeing this kind of amendment on a small business bill? It's ridiculous, and it makes the American people lose faith in us, frankly. This is a bill about small business innovation. This isn't a bill that's about telling EPA that they can no longer do their job and protect the American people. This is ridiculous. We already know from reports how many lives have been saved as a result of, we have it here, and I want my friend to see this. In 2010, the Clean Air Act prevented 160,000 cases of premature death. That's a fact. By 2020, the number's projected to grow to 230,000 deaths. So, excuse me, this amendment, if it were to pass and it stopped EPA from cleaning up the air, people will die, okay? If this is what you want to do, don't hang it on a small business bill. Why don't you have a press conference and say, you know what, we don't think this is worth it. 160,000 deaths, win a few, lose a few, They don't care at all. But we care, and that's why we're talking about this. And I'll yield again to my friend. This is what they would turn away from, saving 160,000 premature deaths. That's documented in 2010 alone.
I would just have one last question for my colleague, because I think these attempts that try to carve out pollutants and give them exemptions are just never, good policy, because there's so much at stake for the American public who believes that our job is to protect them with clean air and clean water and to make sure that polluters, are regulated. But it reminds me of that 2003 energy bill that was kind of done behind closed doors when the whole MTBE debate, the additive to fuel, came up. And I remember one newspaper ended up dubbing the bill the Hooters and Polluters and Corporate Looters bill or something like that, because it ended up trying to carve out for the manufacturers of that product that they would be exempted. And it was a bipartisan effort on the Senate floor. My colleagues from the Northeast, from New Hampshire, I believe, and it may have been the senators from Maine, all said, wait a minute, we're not going to exempt MTBE out of this legislation as a way to get an energy policy for the future. So I asked my colleague from California if she remembers that and other attempts to try to do this without the public fully understanding what is at stake for clean air and clean water, and if she remembers that failure because of doing this, that really left the public vulnerable, and if there were other instances of that debate that she could recall for us, because I think it's very similar.
Well, there's clearly been a lot of moves on the part of the special interests in this country, the biggest polluters, to get their way. And they try every which way to get their way. Now, if they can make the case to you, or I say to my friend or to me, that what they want is good for the American people, that's great. Make the case. Who could ever make the case that stopping the Environmental Protection Agency from enforcing the Clean Air Act is good for the people? They can't. So what do? And my friend is right to recall these other attempts. They couch it in, oh, it's going to lower the price of gas, or it's really good for business, or it's really good for jobs, when the truth is it's devastating for all of those things. My friend has been a leader on consumer protection. Oh, my goodness, we remember the fights when we had the Enrons of the world destroying people by raising the price of electricity behind closed doors in a conspiracy to do that. Remember those battles we were in? These battles keep coming back at us. Do you know, I would say to my friend's asking me questions, but I would ask her rhetorically, in this bill, it is so radical, it goes after fuel economy standards and it says, no more. EPA, you're out of that. Can't deal with it ever again. Even though we know fuel economy, when you get it done right, it takes those toxins out of the air. Plus, you get better fuel mileage, and that's going to get us off of foreign oil. It takes that away. Chalk one up for the Middle East oil barons. That's good for them. It's not good for America. Yeah, chalk that up for them. We already know what happens to kids. Let's do this picture, because it just shows you the look on this child's face. We already know what happens to our kids when the air is dirty. Well, the fact of the matter is, if you take EPA out of the business of cleaning up carbon pollution and all the co-contaminants that go in the air with it, such as mercury, and I could list them, people are going to be really sick. But here's the beyond the pale what they do. In addition to those things, they even stop in this amendment the carbon registry, so that America, you might as well cover your eyes, cover your ears, and cover your mouth, because you will not speak evil, you will not hear evil, you will not see evil, you will not see, you will not hear, and you cannot speak about the carbon pollution in the air. That's what's going on here. So my friend is right to connect this to a whole line of faulty reasoning that the American people have been asked to swallow, but I've got news for you. They're smart. 69% think EPA should update the Clean Air Act standards with stricter air pollution limits. 68% believe that Congress should not stop EPA from enforcing the Clean Air Act. And 69% believe that EPA scientists, not Congress, should set pollution standards. So this vote we're going to have tonight, I hope we'll have it tonight, is really about whether you want Congress to play doctor and scientist and decide what is best for the people, or allow that to be done by the physicians, by the scientists, and by an agency that is extremely popular in this country. It's not popular right here, right now, I'll tell you that, because the polluters don't want anything to do with it. But we don't represent polluters. We represent everyone, everyone. And a vast majority want us to say to this McConnell amendment no. So I would yield to my friend if she has a final comment or question.
Well, I want to thank the chair of the EPW committee and a great legislator protecting the interest of consumers on this issue. I serve with you on the Commerce Committee, and I see you fight for consumers every day. Your passenger Bill of Rights for the airlines and the FAA bill is just another perfect example of how you're thinking about how all legislation impacts individuals and their rights. And this is about the right to clean air and clean water, and to make sure that we are not going to cut EPA out of the regulation of pollutants business. I don't know why we would do that. That's their day job. They are supposed to regulate pollutants. The Supreme Court has said they're supposed to regulate pollutants. So I thank my colleague for waging this battle here against this amendment that, as she has outlined, has these radical notions in it. But I guess I go back to we can try to keep hanging on to the past and saying that the past is going to take us somewhere. That usually doesn't work. And I would say that my colleague from California understands probably more than any other state, because of the efficiency gains that California has made in creating jobs, and getting more out of our current energy supply. And the initiative that was just run in California, people were, I think that was about going back to the past too, wasn't it? That initiative, people said, okay, do we want to go backwards or do we want to go forward? And the people spoke in California and they said, let's move forward. So I would just conclude by thanking my colleague and asking her just one last time if, from an economic perspective, if America can afford this amendment. How could we afford this amendment if it's going to cause that much health care cost to us, if it's going to cause a loss of the advancements we've seen in the automobile industry? I mean, I would think that Detroit alone would, if you pass this amendment, would stop and say, wait a minute, do we even have to comply with the mile per gallon that's already on the books? Because it seems like Congress is saying that they're out of the business. So I would just say to my colleague from California, how can we afford this amendment? They would like to try to claim that as the only high ground of their debate, that somehow they're protecting jobs. They're not protecting jobs. They're basically trying to take 18th, 19th, and 20th century jobs and somehow say that they don't have to comply with clean air. And so I just, again, I ask my colleague if we can afford that kind of amendment and just thank her for her leadership and tremendous support because, you know, we all come here for different reasons and we all are motivated by different reasons, but I know the senator from California is motivated by doing what's right for consumer and consumer interests. So I thank you for standing up for that voice that may not be being heard today on this important issue. So
well, before my friend leaves, I want to thank her so much, and I am going to yield the floor so my Republican friends have time to speak on this. And America's going to hear a lot of different stories from a lot of other people. But remember, this is pretty simple. This amendment stops the Environmental Protection Agency from doing its job. And I want to thank my friend and tell her that we can't afford this amendment. This amendment will hurt America. It will hurt it in every way. It will hurt the health of Americans. It will hurt jobs in this country. It will hurt consumers. And I'm proud to stand with her, and I hope that she'll wait to talk with me outside that door for just a moment. I yield the floor, and I note that Senator Snowe, I think, would like to have the floor, and I will yield the floor at this time.
Madam President.
The senator from Maine.
Yes, Madam President, I would like to speak to the amendment that I called up earlier, Amendment 193. This is a bipartisan amendment that has been co-sponsored by the chair of the committee, Senator Landrieu, as well as Senator Coburn, who, as we all know, has been recognized as a true leader in this body for streamlining federal government. And we had a discussion recently about, you know, what programs or agencies or entities that could be eliminated, and we readily identified the Veterans Corporation, or simply known as the TVC, as an example of an organization that should be removed from federal statute, and for the reasons that I will enumerate, Madam President. The Veterans Corporation has been ineffective and controversial since its inception as part of the Veterans Entrepreneurship and the Small Business Development Act back in 1999. In fact, in December of 2008, the former Small Business Committee Chairman, Senator Kerry, and I investigated the Veterans Corporation and issued a report detailing the organization's blatant mismanagement and wasting of taxpayers' dollars. The report, and I will ask unanimous consent to submit it for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. The report was initiated by the Small Business Committee, and among other things, that the Veterans Corporation, one, failed to support Veterans Business Resource Centers, that it had wasteful programs, that it lacked outcome-based measurements, provided its employees with unacceptably high executive compensation, and engaged in dubious expenditures and failed to properly fundraise the necessary funds to become self-sufficient that they were required to do under the law. For example, our report concluded that the Veterans Corporation had spent only 15% of the federal funding that it had received on Veterans Business Resource Centers, which the TVC was required to establish and maintain under law. In fact, in 2008, the percentage dropped to about 9%. We also found that the executives at TVC received unacceptably high levels of compensation given the organization's limited resources and reach. While an average of 15% of the Veterans Corporation's federally appropriated funds went to the centers, 22% of the funds that were appropriated in 2007 were spent on its top 2 executives' compensation packages alone. Moreover, the organization miserably failed to raise the sufficient funds as required by law in order to develop that self-sufficiency and independence from federal appropriations. And during the fiscal year 2005 through 2007, the Veterans Corporation leaders spent $2.50 for every dollar they raised through the organization's fundraising efforts, almost entirely at the taxpayers' expense. Additionally, through broad-based decision-making powers granted to the Veterans Corporation's Executive Committee under the organization's bylaw, the committee approved a number of measures without proper approval or ratification from the full board, including $40,000 employee bonuses in 1 year alone. Since the issuing of the Small Business Committee's report, the Congress appropriated no additional funding for the TVC, and the Small Business Administration incorporated the Veterans Business Resource Centers previously funded into the existing network of the Veterans Business Outreach Centers. These moves were publicly supported by a variety of veteran service organizations, including the American Legion and the Veterans of Foreign War. For example, in August of 2008, the American Legion passed a resolution at its national convention stating that the Legion, and I quote, no longer supports the continuing initiatives or existence of the National Veterans Business Development Corporation. And I ask unanimous consent to have a copy of this resolution inserted in the record.
Without objection.
At present, the TVC still exists. It is still federally chartered, but as I indicated earlier, it receives no federal funds, has no department or agency oversight, and the White House is unable to even inform my staff of how many members are on the TVC's board of directors at present, including those who have stayed on well beyond their statutory time limits. So in light of everything that I've discussed, and based on the report, it's my belief that the federal government must take the next step and fully sever all ties with the organization. And I would hope that we could get bipartisan support for this initiative, Madam President. It is important to underscore the fact that the report that the committee undertook back in 2008 illustrated serious mismanaged problems with this organization. At first, as they indicated in the summary of the report findings, they failed to achieve their statutory mission, which was to support the Veterans Business Resource Center. They spent its limited resources on several programs that bore little or no relation to the organization's statutory mission. It largely reported the results of its programs by measuring their activity rather than their outcomes. So it was very difficult to really assess actually what their results were and whether or not they were consistent with the intended purposes under federal statute. They mismanaged federal funds with providing for high executive compensation. Dubious expenditures, they also indicated in this report, spent tens of thousands of dollars on expensive dinners for employees, board members at high-priced restaurants here in Washington, luxury hotel rooms, first-class travel arrangements, memberships to various airline club lounges. And the TVC's top 2 executives failed to report over $91,000 in charges on their company-issued credit cards. As I also indicated, they failed to raise the type of funds that are required under statute so that they would become independent of any federal appropriation. It's certainly an abysmal track record, regrettably, and that's why I think, Madam President, that it is important, even though we do not provide any additional appropriations, no appropriations, that we should sever any linkage of federal ties with this entity. So, Madam President, I would hope that we could get bipartisan support, and I will ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there a sufficient second? At this time, there is not a sufficient second.
Madam President.
The senator from Texas.
Madam President, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to set aside the pending amendment and call up my amendment number 186.
Is there objection?
I'm going to object. And just, I know that the senator is very interested in offering his amendments, and we're very interested in hearing about it. But we have now, I think, 6 amendments pending. So if the senator would like to go ahead and just speak about the amendment, explain the amendment, and when we can get an agreement about how we should proceed with these amendments, we could move forward.
Well, Madam President, I'm sorry that Senator from Louisiana objects to me calling the amendment up and getting it pending. I was told, and indeed I think everyone's operating under the impression that this was going to be an open amendment process and have a debate on important issues. This happens to be relating to the establishment of a sunset commission, such as that was recommended by the Fiscal Commission appointed by the President of the United States and which enjoyed broad bipartisan support.
Would the senator yield for just a clarification? This most certainly is an open process. What I was trying to explain to the senator, there have been about a half dozen other senators that have come down to the floor during the day. That it's like Senator Hutchinson, who came down earlier, and we're trying to just be accommodating in the order the senators come. So if you don't mind just explaining your amendment, and I commit to you and with Senator Snowe, we'll try to get it pending on the list as soon as we can.
Well, Madam President, I've been waiting all day like all of my colleagues, and I'm here at the floor to offer an amendment, and I'm sorry that the senator thinks it's necessary to object. I'm not sure what harm it calls to get another amendment pending, and I'm happy to vote on any of these amendments as the majority leader determines to set the votes, or the bill managers. But I will speak just briefly on the Amendment 186 that I will call up at the appropriate time. All of us can agree that the nation faces the greatest fiscal challenge in its history, with growing deficits and record debt. Currently, the deficit being roughly 9.8% of our gross domestic product, the debt north of $14 trillion, so high that, in fact, we will be asked here sometime in the spring to consider voting on lifting the debt limit, in effect raising the debt limit on the nation's credit card because it's maxed out. According to the two, facing a debt crisis, a loss of confidence that we would actually be able to pay back our debt, in that crisis could come as soon as in the next 2 years. That's why the amendment that I'm offering today, which I hope will enjoy broad bipartisan support, establishes indeed a bipartisan United States Authorization and Sunset Commission that will help improve oversight and eliminate wasteful government spending. The amendment is modeled after the sunset process that was instituted in Texas in 1977, which has, over the years, eliminated 50 different state agencies and saved taxpayers more than $700 million. Now, that may not seem like a big money in Washington terms, but that's a substantial amount of savings in Texas. And this is what the President's own Fiscal Commission had to say about such a concept, and this is a quotation. Such a committee has been recommended many times and has found bipartisan support. The original and arguably the most effective committee exists at the state level in Texas. The legislature created a Sunset Commission in 1977 to eliminate waste and inefficiency in government agencies. Estimates from reviews conducted between 1982 and 2009 showed a 27-year savings of over $780 million compared with expenditures of $28.6 million. Based on savings achieved, for every dollar spent on the Sunset Commission, the state has received $27 in return. This commission, under my amendment, would be made up of 8 members of Congress that would focus on unauthorized programs that continue to receive taxpayers' money. As the chair knows, Madam President, you know, one of the biggest problems we have when it comes to unsupervised spending is the fact that the authorizing committees don't necessarily authorize a program, but yet the appropriators, for one reason or another, have appropriated money, and those are never given the kind of oversight that is really necessary. This means that Congress has dropped the ball when they're spending without authorization when it comes to doing the hard work of figuring out if these programs are working, but the spending nevertheless continues. As Ronald Reagan famously said, the closest thing to eternal life here on earth is a temporary government program. There is no such thing here in Washington, D.C. The Congressional Budget Office regularly finds that billions of dollars are being spent in unauthorized programs. In addition, the Commission would focus on duplicative and redundant government programs annually identified by the Government Accountability Office. The GAO, as we all recall, recently found that billions of taxpayer dollars are being spent on duplicative and redundant government programs. For example, the federal government has more than 100 different programs dealing with surface transportation issues, 100. 82 monitoring teacher quality, 80 for economic development, 47 for job training, and 17 different grant programs for disaster preparedness. I think common sense would tell us that that kind of duplication and overlap is not efficient and it's not effective use of taxpayer dollars. Under my amendment, the Sunset Commission would review each program and submit their recommendations which must be considered by Congress under expedited procedures like we use under the Budget Act. In other words, it could not be filibustered. It would have to be voted on. Congress would not be able to ignore the Commission's reports. The amendment provides expedited procedures that would force Congress to consider and debate the Commission's work. Congress would have 2 years to consider and pass the Commission's recommendations or to reauthorize the program before it would be abolished by operation of law. In other words, the program is abolished if Congress fails to reauthorize it 2 years after the Commission completes its review and analysis of the program. This Commission would help force Congress to do the necessary oversight to make sure that every taxpayer dollar is wisely spent. While we all do our best to ensure that proper oversight is given to each program, we simply don't have the tools currently available to monitor and review every program. This Sunset Commission would provide Congress with those tools. It would improve government accountability and provide for greater openness in government decision-making. Programs that have simply outlived their usefulness or fail to spend taxpayer dollars efficiently are a burden, we know, on the American taxpayer and should be eliminated. But we simply don't have the means to get there from here. Congress has a spending process in place, and we should put together a sunset process for streamlining and eliminating government waste. That's what this amendment would do. The Commission would supplement the work of the congressional committees that are already in place, that I know mean well and intend to do the oversight, but simply never seem to get around to it. It will not replace the work of those committees, however. It will supplement and, I would say, improve and strengthen their oversight work. It will serve as another set of eyeballs, keeping a close eye on the wallet belonging to the taxpayers. This Commission will help Congress answer a simple but powerful question. Is this program still needed? Is this program still needed? A Sunset Commission would help us make many programs more effective by giving them the attention they deserve and exposing their faults to the light of day. It will improve government accountability and provide for greater openness in government decision-making. Programs that outlive their usefulness or fail to spend tax dollars efficiently are a burden on the American taxpayer and must be eliminated or reformed. As we continue to face the mounting deficit and a struggling economy, shouldn't we be doing everything in our power to spend smarter and spend less? Imagine the tax dollars that could be saved by reviewing and revamping outdated and inefficient programs. It's my hope that our colleagues, Mr. President, will join me in supporting a government-wide Sunset Commission, and I'd urge all of my colleagues to support this amendment so we can start setting our spending priorities straight.
Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know that the members are following the debate on this bill carefully in their amendments, so let me just bring everyone up to date. It's about 5 after 5. We hope to have a vote around 6 o'clock, potentially 2 votes. We have about 5 amendments pending. Senator Cornyn would like his amendment pending. Senator Hutchinson is here to speak about, I think, two amendments that she may want to have pending. and Senator Joe Hines is on the floor to speak on the underlying McConnell amendment. So what I'd like to do is ask for a unanimous consent in a few minutes to try to get 1 or 2 votes set up for 6 o'clock, potentially get these other amendments pending and set a time for votes tomorrow so we can move through. We want to have as open a debate as possible, but we also really want to focus on the bill at hand, which is the Small Business Reauthorization Act and related measures, and many of these are somewhat related to jobs and economy, so we're trying to be liberal in our views here. But we do want to try to be as orderly and as appropriate as members have come down to the floor in the order that they've come. So why don't we turn now to Senator Hutchinson, and Senator Cornyn, we'll get back to you as soon as we can about getting your amendment pending, if we can do that before the night ends.
Object any unanimous
Senator from
consent.
Texas.
I'm going to object any unanimous consent requests until we have some understanding about when I'll be allowed and others will be allowed to offer their amendments.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I want to speak in favor of the McConnell amendment, which is the pending amendment, which the senator from Louisiana is trying to get tagged for a vote. But I also do want to have the opportunity to support 2 of the amendments that I have offered, at least filed, and would like to have them pending as soon as the process allows. So let me just say that I do support the McConnell amendment. And let me just be pretty clear and pretty simple. In the last session of Congress, Senator Lieberman and Senator Kerry offered a climate change regulation that would have caused our fuel prices to go up exponentially. And Senator Bond and I did a study on the Kerry-Lieberman multi-trillion-dollar tax bill that would have happened if Congress had passed their legislation. We estimated that it would have been about $3.6 trillion in total fuels added expense to the small businesses and the families in this country. And we have documented that in this report. And, Mr. President, I would like to ask unanimous consent to submit this report for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. And, Mr. President, the reason is because we didn't pass that legislation because everyone realized it would have raised the cost of gasoline. Now, the EPA is trying to do the same thing by fiat, by executive fiat. They are trying to regulate greenhouse gases. Now, what they're going to do is raise the cost of fuel at a time when people are suffering at the pump. I mentioned earlier that I filled up my pickup truck last weekend, and it was almost $50. Now, I know every American is having the same experience, and if they have an SUV, it's even more. We cannot allow the EPA, through greenhouse gas regulations, to increase the cost of fuel. When they put that regulation on a refinery, and we have very few refineries, we haven't built a new refinery in this country since 1973 because it is so regulated that we really have a shortage of refineries. It's one of the problems with the supply issue in providing gasoline at reasonable prices. We need to be stepping back, not stepping forward with more regulations, and the EPA is doing something that Congress wouldn't do. Now, oddly, the EPA is not authorized to make regulations that Congress doesn't pass. They are to implement the law, not make it. But that's what they're doing, and we are trying to stop it with the McConnell amendment that would repeal the EPA greenhouse gas regulations, and I hope that my colleagues will support it. In addition, as a former small business person myself, I know
that it is very hard for small businesses to make ends meet. And I have heard from so many of the people in Texas who are now trying to make ends meet and keep people employed in small business. And this health care reform bill is causing them to not hire people because they don't know what the costs are going to be. Because basically, you are going to be taxed if you are an individual or a small business that doesn't adopt the government-prescribed health care insurance for your employees or your family. Now, that's the bottom line. If you don't do exactly what the government says and meet their government-required standards, even if the employees are happy with their health care coverage or certainly don't want to be left to the government health care, you will still get the fine, and most small businesses that I talk to are saying, hey, I'm going to pay the fine. It's easier. I don't have liability. I don't have to hire people to work with my employees to get the best prices. That takes a lot of my time, and it's not helpful to the bottom line of my company, and therefore I'm just going to pay the fine and let the government do it. Health care is not going to improve for the small businesses and the families in this country. So my amendment number 197 that has been filed, which I hope to have pending, is called the SOS Act, Save Our States, meaning while the Florida case that has said the health care reform law is unconstitutional is still unsettled, states should not be spending the money and small businesses should not be spending the money to implement a law that may be thrown out anyway by the courts. Let's not cause the financially strapped states and the financially strapped small businesses in this country to have to spend the money to implement the health care reform bill until we know it really is the law of the land. And right now that is a question because two courts have thrown it out as unconstitutional, one in Virginia and one in Florida. So my amendment number 197 will say we will delay implementation. We will not require any cost to be incurred by a business, an individual, or a state until it is clear it has gone to the Supreme Court and the Health Care Reform Act really is the law of the land. That could save millions for our states and millions for the businesses across our country. I hope that we can get this amendment pending. The second amendment is number 198. It's called the Lease Act. It's really simple. Today, we have a virtual moratorium. My colleague from Louisiana has designated what we have as a permatorium because there is almost no activity, new activity in the Gulf of Mexico in deep water drilling activity. Now, we know that gasoline at the pump is going up because there is a shortage of supply. If we would get these leases out there, all of the exploration that's being done, and allow the people who have paid the bonuses for the leases to fully use their leases, then we would give them one more year to be able to determine if it is worth it to drill a well in the Gulf of Mexico and start pumping oil and increase our supply through our own natural resources that God has given to our country. Our amendment number 198, which is the Hutchison-Landrieu bill, would just extend for 1 year, which is the time that these people have paid for a lease but not been able to use it because there is a moratorium on the deepwater drilling, and the Department of Interior has now only given a maximum of 3, possibly only 2, permits for the people who had been able to explore before the BP spill. So I hope to get both of those amendments up. I can think of nothing that would help small business more than to know that they will not have to implement the Health Care Reform Act. They can go ahead and hire people, free them to build up their employment base, which is what we all want to do, build our economy, and secondly, to hopefully get a better price of fuel for them so that they will not have to suffer with these high gasoline prices. Most small businesses in a poll said that their top 3 expenditures include the cost of fuel and electricity and natural gas. So we need to give our small businesses help, and I hope that we can get our amendments number 197 and 198 pending at the appropriate time. And at this point, I hope my colleagues will support Senator McConnell's amendment to stop the EPA from adding costs to the refineries and the gasoline producers of our country. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the senator.
The senator from Louisiana.
Thank you. I thank the senator from Texas, and I really appreciate the patience of my colleagues that are on the floor. Because we've had 2 or 3 colleagues from this side of the aisle speak, I thought it would be appropriate to go to the senator from Oregon, then recognizing Senator Joe Hans to speak on his amendment and Senator Rand to then speak on his amendment. If no one objects, I don't see anyone on the floor. If we could go in that order, I think everyone could be accommodated before the vote at 6 o'clock. Is that okay with everyone? Thank you.
Mr. President.
The senator from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to address